You're fond of decision making. What's the best decision you've ever made in your life, and what's the worst decision you've ever made in your life?
I'm probably going to give you a terrible answer to this. I think my worst decisions, I'm too embarrassed to talk
Okay,
about
that's fine. I probably
publicly.
wouldn't be able to
But
publicly
look,
admit my
but I've
worst.
made a lot of look. I will tell you, all of my worst decisions have been about inaction, not action. I know that like I've never made a terrible. Of the 100 worst decisions I've made, I'm sure that 99 of them were not doing something as opposed to doing
Interesting.
something. There are very few really bad things I've done.
By the way, I feel the
But
opposite, Steve. My worst decisions have been decisions of bad action, not inaction. But that's yeah.
interesting.
So,
That's
and what's the best decision you think you've ever made, or a subset of the best decisions you've ever made?
um, I think the I don't know if you'd actually call it a decision, but the decision, it's sort of a decision to not care what people think about me. It's not a decision in like, oh, I went back to school, I didn't go back to school, but I somehow just made a choice. It's a choice. I don't know if you call it a choice. I made a choice to just not care what other people thought about me, and which was a big choice for me because, like most high school kids, I all I cared about was what other people thought about me. And at some point, I just broke with that, and and was happy to live with the consequences. And it's just a great way to live. To It just frees you up from so much burden. I think all my best decisions are ones that have relieved burdens. I'll give you another one, which is trivial in comparison, but important. Like I used to be super cheap. I used to worry about every transaction I made and like prided myself on being frugal and thinking about, oh, should I spend that dollar on a bottled water in the airport or not? And at some point, I just said, hey, this is like I could free up a lot of mind space if I just didn't worry about decisions that were like under $5. And it was hard for me to do, but I said, look, I'm going to stop. If it's under $5, when I start to go into this frenzy, I'm going to forget about it. And then I moved it up to like 10 or 20. And like the high, it's like for me, it's like the higher the better. And it is just so liberating for me that I just have this rule of thumb that like if it's under some, ridiculously large amount of money, I just don't worry about it. And and look, it adds up. I probably, I waste tens of thousands, if not more, dollars a year because I'm not getting these decisions right. And that's awesome because I free up, 10% of my time to do whatever the hell I want. And I love doing the stuff I do. And it's just super liberating. So I think many of the things I like are these things that have been liberating, where I stop worrying about stuff. And maybe it's not that far off than your idea of radical acceptance. Like, I don't know, it's like not radical acceptance, but it's like, it's just a total acceptance that there's going to be these imperfections. I'm just not going to worry about getting things exactly right.
Now, do you think in general we as a species are good at decision making? What is there a way to evaluate this? I mean, like,
Um, Good compared to what, I'm not sure, but good compared to optimal. No, we're terrible. I mean, it's like behavioral economics of the last 40 or 50 years shows how bad we are at making decisions. And I think the best evidence of this is the people who know the most about decision making. So whether it's like these really prominent economists who've thought enormous amounts about backward induction and optimized behavior in dynamic systems, or whether it's Danny Kahneman who has spent more time thinking about behavior economics. These are the worst decision makers I've ever seen. I mean, Kahneman even is like very forthright. He said like the reason I study decision making is because I'm awful at it, and with everything that he's learned, he's still awful at it. And so I think, yeah, I don't think humans are good at making decisions, and I think we can arm ourselves with tools. Like there are a lot of economics is really common sense codified into helping you make better decisions. I think a fair amount of psychology and pop psychology is that as well. But look, and there's no one who talks more than me about how we don't quit enough, and and how people get stuck in bad situations. Like, I know that, and I have so much trouble quitting. I mean, it's stuff I should quit. I eventually do quit it, but it takes me usually, like, on average 2 years longer to quit something than I know what I know I should have quit it 2 years before I do it. Look, and I understand all of the problems. I understand exactly what the situation is, and but to overcome the complexity of the brain and all these forces, it's super hard to make good decisions.
What do you think? Do you think there's an evolutionary force behind that?
I think that the evolutionary, when we were evolving, the kind of choices you had to make are so different than the ones that we face now, that it's not a surprise that evolution would not necessarily be our friend in these kinds of decisions. I mean, just I don't know anything about it really, but my sense is that evolution has not been our friend in the nutrition realm, right? Because we evolved in an environment of scarcity, and now we live in an environment of plenty, and all of the triggers we get from evolutionary triggers we get are the wrong ones. And probably that's the same with decision making, right? We evolved in settings where we were like facing life and death problems all the time. I mean, I think one of the hugest problems that we face mental health wise is trauma, and people are stuck in a trauma mode and reacting to trauma, which evolutionarily is probably fantastic, because the kind of challenges we faced when we were evolving were short-term, incredibly intense risks that you needed to marshal everything in your body and your mind to fight. But now those aren't typically the kind of risks that or challenges we're facing, and so people end up using the wrong set of tools. The body is just not configured well for the kind of chronic settings of we live in, of too many people, too much information, constant fears and threats around it. So, like, I don't know much about it, but like, I think there's zero reason to think that evolution is our friend when it comes to difficult, complex decisions, because we just didn't look. How complex could the decisions have been when we were evolving? I mean, I look back at like, this is maybe off track, but it was something that really struck me. I went to Australia for a while, and was talking with some guide as we went around Ayers Rock, Uluru, and talking about how basically the Aboriginal life had not changed hardly at all over the course of I don't know, 5,000 years or something. And it was interesting to think about. Like, you don't need much innovation at all, right? You innovate 1% per generation, and over 5,000 years, life is completely transformed. So it's like there's literally no innovation going on. I mean, there are things like they didn't have the wheel, because in the bush the wheel didn't do very much good. So, like, it was interesting to hear about. But it really hit home for me, that observation, which is modern life and this idea of progress and innovation and being better off than your parents. Like, that's a super, super modern idea, not at all one associated with mankind's existence over, huge, except for this tiny sliver of kind of post-industrial life that we're in.
It makes it almost impossible to fathom what another 100 years looks like, for exactly that reason. The non-linearity of what the acceleration of technology has been like in 100 years, and what it looks like going forward. This podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Finally, I take conflicts of interest very seriously. For all of my disclosures and the companies I invest in or advise, please visit peterattiamd.com/about, where I keep an up-to-date and active list of such companies.